praise you. God, we honor you. We thank you for being our champion. When we have battles that we're facing in our life, that we don't have to fight because we know you're going to fight for us as long as we follow you. That we can't be defeated, even if we feel like we're being defeated, as long as we keep our eyes fixed on you and obey your word. So we thank you for being the champion for us. Lord, I pray for students, maybe adults in here who feel like they're fighting a battle. Whether it's at home, maybe at school, maybe it's in their mind with themselves, in their marriage, I don't know, God. Lord, I pray that they would trust in you to fight it for them so they can see the victory that they need. So in Jesus' name we pray. Everybody said, amen, amen, amen. I feel God's presence in this place. Have a seat. The band, thank you guys so much. Y'all kill it every week. Hey, October's kind of been a potluck month. If you don't know what a potluck is, it's probably because not many people do potlucks anymore. But since we had fall break last week, trunk or treat, next week we decided we were going to kind of, do whatever we wanted in October, not do a sermon series, and just kind of see how God moved. So, if you remember back in April, if you were here with us in April, we did a testimony series where you guys heard from some students, some adults. You heard from Maddox, and you heard from Grace, and you heard from Drew, Vincent. But who you did not hear from was my wife, Dawn. And that's because this is going to be a rough night. I'm good. Because we spent all of the month of April in the hospital. You guys kind of know what went on with Dawn's health that month. We spent the whole month of April up at Mercy in the hospital, and then rehabbing all summer at home. And, it was a really tough time for us. And so we decided we were going to push the testimony to a later date, and tonight is that night. All right, so without further ado, pay attention to this testimonial video.
I feel like there is a turning point in my life around the time that I hit about 8th grade, going into 9th grade. Growing up, I always struggled with wanting to be accepted and loved by people to the extent that I would dress a certain way, talk a certain way. I would go over and beyond just to make sure that people liked me. I worried so much about what people thought of me. I had full intentions of I was a Christian, I made good choices, I lived a Christian life, but then I was put into the spotlight from everybody at the school, and I was all of a sudden part of the cool crowd and the popular crowd, and I felt like for me, I had to make a choice on if I was going to please those people or please God, and as a teenage girl, it was more important for me to fit in. I feel like where I really took a definite turn away from God was my senior year, based on an event that happened that I got really angry at him for. There was a boy that we were supposed to go to lunch. He was very flirtatious in the text messages, and I didn't want him to think that I didn't like him, or didn't want him to think that I was lame or anything like that. So I would flirt back. I thought it was all harmless. Things that were being said was I didn't think were really being taken seriously until we did go to lunch, and I ended up in a position where I couldn't get myself out of. He had said that he needed to go to his house to pick something up, and it's probably going to be a minute, so I should just go in with him. And I ended up in a very scary situation that I felt like I couldn't say no to. I tried to say no. He was very, pressuring, and then he got threatening in it. And I remember thinking after, it turned into this huge ordeal, legally and at school even. I felt completely shunned, I guess, by everybody. I remember thinking in that moment when all this was going on that how could God let this happen? I went my entire life, I lived my life for him. I grew up in church. He was supposed to be protecting me in this moment, and I remember thinking, if God was there, why wasn't he there in that moment? Why didn't he help me get out of the situation when I was telling this boy no? I feel like after that, just because of the way that it changed my reputation at the school, the way it changed my relationship with my family. My parents were there for me, but I couldn't stand being around them because I could see the disappointment in their eyes of what had happened and how, you know, I mean, in my eyes, I got myself into that situation, so I deserved it. And totally not true. So I did what I did best. I ran. And I moved to Stratford. I started getting with this group of friends that I really enjoyed hanging out with at the time. They were not Christians. In fact, every weekend there was always a party going on. It turned into me going to the parties. I wasn't drinking. Then I go to more parties and not drink, and then I go to another party, and then, oh, Dawn, here, taste this. Or, Dawn, hey, you would really like this. And it turned into I would have a drink here or there. I met this other girl that we became super close, and then I became really close with all of her friends, and she went to OSU. And so it turned into, I wasn't just partying down in Stratford now, I was driving up to Stillwater every weekend, and I was going up to the bars there. And it would be like a full weekend thing, and then I would drive home. And I remember at the time going to Stillwater and hanging out there that, I mean, in my mind, I was having the time of my life, but I always remember feeling like I would wake up the next morning and still feel empty inside. I had no relationship with God. I would claim to be a Christian. However, my actions and my daily choices did not reflect that at all. So during all of this time, I remember, like I said, there was this conflicting feeling in me, and I feel like looking back that was God pulling me back towards Him, kind of whispering in my ear, come home, Dawn, come home. And I remember when I moved to Stratford, my parents and I had gotten into this argument. I said I was never going to move back home. So I was pretty stubborn, and I wanted to stick to that. I was not moving back to Tuttle. But the more that I was making these choices every weekend, the more that I was feeling this urge, I need to go home. And I remember calling my mom and telling her, Mom, I need to move back home. And obviously, my parents were welcoming. They welcomed me with open arms, told me, come home, Dawn, we'll help you move. I started going back to church with them. So there was a Sunday that we had not gone to the bridge in 8 years. And my mom one day was like, hey, let's try the bridge out again. And we thought it was the craziest thing because we hadn't been in so long, but we were like, all right, let's go. And my youngest brother, he actually got really involved with the youth at the time, and so it was really neat watching him. And I remember looking at him one Sunday. It was in the middle of worship, and I was still kind of living this alternative life outside of home. At home I was portraying that I was this Christian girl, that everything was good again, and so I was being very sneaky around my family. And I remember looking over at my brother, and I'm just watching the way he was worshiping and how genuine it was, and feeling so much guilt because here, was my youngest brother, he was my baby brother, seeing him worshiping God and going after God, and just thinking if he only knew what I was doing, where I had been last night, what kind of choices I was making last night, what I was doing last night, his heart would be broken. I remember in that moment watching him and God saying, Dawn, it's time to come home. After I got my life right with God, it's crazy how beforehand my life felt so chaotic, like it was just unspiraling, nothing was going right. And after I got my life right with God, I felt like there was just this peace that went over me. I started distancing myself from these friends. I remember feeling lonely. I remember questioning, did I make the right decision? Because I was more lonely than I'd ever been. And it was then that I really started seeing things just kind of fall into place there. I met my husband. We have 2 beautiful children and one on the way that we're excited about. We're youth pastors, and looking back, if you would have told me, goodness, 10, 15 years ago that, Dawn, you were going to marry a youth pastor, you guys are going to be youth pastors at a church, I probably would have laughed at you, just because that was the way I was living my life. That was impossible. That would have been impossible to me. And I look back and I think if God can take someone like me who is living this life that is completely opposite of what His will was for my life and what He wants for me, to where I am now and living, the blessings that He's poured into my life, then He can do that for you. And if you're in here tonight and you feel like all hope is lost, that you are a lost cause, you've made way too many mistakes, and there is no way that God can turn your life around, just know that I was there. I lived a life that there was no hope left for me at all. And if He can do it for me, He can definitely do it for you.
So Don, you mentioned this video, it's your whole life story, your testimony, and where things really seemed to change or start to change was really the first big change in your life, this move from Mustang to Tuttle. You'd grown up in Mustang, a house in Mustang, going to Mustang schools, and then when that change happened, a big change seemed to happen in you. Walk us through that, what changed and what happened necessarily.
Sure. So growing up, I cared a lot about what everybody else thought about me. I was super insecure. I had zero confidence. And I remember at Mustang, I was very shy and timid, and I was known as like the sweet girl or the innocent one, and I hated it. For whatever reason, I did not like having that reputation. I wanted to be cool. I wanted, to fit in. And so I wanted to change that about myself. So we moved to Tuttle, and it was during that time that I felt like I started being noticed by other people. I instantly fell into, the cool crowd at school, and it was like girls wanted to be my friend, guys were interested in me, and it was a kind of attention that I had never had before. And so I liked that feeling, I liked that confidence that I was feeling, but it was an unhealthy confidence. And I felt like I needed to feed it, right? So it changed, the way that I would dress, the things that I would post, the things that I would say. I remember there's times that we have memories that come up on like social media accounts, right? And there are some things that come up that I've posted in the past that I'm just like, oh, why did I post that? That's so embarrassing. And there are things that I've deleted from my social media accounts, but yet I have like friends in the past that have tagged me in things like the good old days. No, they weren't. But things like that. So it still haunts me to this day. I remember, as far as the way that I would dress, I dressed in a way that gave me confidence, but not a healthy confidence, meaning that like I would dress to please other guys. I would dress to please other people. And so when I would wear something, I felt good in it, but it wasn't because I felt good, and it was because I thought, this guy's I'm going to catch his eye, right? I'm going to, he's going to think I look good in this outfit. And I remember there being times that I would leave the house and I'd have like this cute outfit on, right? And I would walk out the door, I'd be going to hang out with some friends, and I would literally drive down to the gas station down the street from our house. And my parents are in this room, and so this is really hard to say because I don't think they know this, but I would drive down to the gas station, or I could just go to the friend's house, and I would change into an outfit that I know good and well, if they saw that outfit, there's no way they were letting me out of the house, right? It would probably go straight to the trash. But that's what I would do. So I was sneaking behind their backs. So I feel like I was basing a lot of my decisions at this point in my life based on other people's opinions of me. I started conforming to my surroundings, right? The way that I would dress, the way that I would talk, the way, the pictures that I would post on social media, it was all about the likes and the comments that I would get. It wasn't for me, it was for everybody else around me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, because you mentioned confidence, and I think confidence is a good thing. I see students sometimes like, man, they need some more confidence. We talk about instilling confidence in our kids all the time. But what you're saying is you have to be careful where you're putting your self-worth in that's giving you that confidence. People who can change their mind about you if you don't do what they want, or if you don't, if you're afraid they're going to think differently of you because you change the way you dress or the way you talk all of a sudden. And putting your identity and stuff like that. When your confidence should come in with your relationship with God, with your relationship with people who love you, and that's important because students, The thing is there are people in your life who want what's best for you, and it's probably not you. You want what's fun for you. You want what will make you happy. But a lot of times we don't want what's best for us. We want what's going to be the funnest for us. But people like your parents and your youth sponsors and your teachers and your youth pastors, you put your confidence in relationships like that because they want what's best for you, your relationship with God, things that can't be taken from you. So it seemed like things pinnacled to this point your senior year when you found yourself, in this situation with this boy. And it's not a situation I'm saying that it's your fault. But a lot of times we don't wake up one day and think, I'm going to make a really bad decision today. We don't wake up one day and think, I'm going to drink and drive and kill a family because I'm drunk. A lot of times it's little unwise decisions that we've made that get us in a predicament that we can't get out of, and we end up sinning or doing something bad. What were unwise decisions that you feel like you made leading up to that point?
Really, I feel like what you said about it not being my fault, I feel like that's something that I need to note right now, because I feel that there are girls in this room that have been in similar situations, and you need to know tonight that it is not your fault at all. But looking back, there were definitely things that I could have done to prevent putting myself in that situation. For instance, I ignored every single red flag that was placed in front of me, every single one of them. I remember prior to going to lunch with this guy, I had two friends, and these were girls that I could trust their advice from. They had my best interest in mind. And I remember them coming to me and saying, Dawn, you need to let this guy go. He is bad news. He is not somebody that you need to be texting right now. He's not it. Okay, just find somebody else that he is not it. And I remember thinking, oh, they probably just don't know him the way that I know him. He's never talked to them the way that he talks to me. Like, they don't know what they're talking about. So I ignored that. And then, because that wasn't enough, I remember when we would text, he would say things in it that were pretty risque, I guess. They were borderline. And I remember looking at these text messages and thinking, oh, he's just being sweet to me. He must really like me if he's saying this. And can I just stop here for a second? Because I feel like there's somebody in this room that needs to hear this. Girls, I'm talking to you. Not every sweet text that you get from a guy that says something along the lines of, you're the only girl I felt this way about. You're the only girl I've asked this from. Trust me. You're the only girl that I've done this with. No, it's not. Girl, he's lying, okay? He's probably sent it to 5 other girls prior to sending it to you. And you need to know tonight that you are worth so much more than some teenage boy who thinks so little of you. But I went on to, that was the I guess, like, really big red flag, okay? At some point during all of this, when I was talking to him, I remember getting grounded from my phone for some reason unrelated. My parents didn't know about this guy at the time, so it was some reason I had gotten grounded from my phone. And that should have been my out to this, right? That should have been like, oh, okay, I can't text you because I don't have a phone. But instead, I remember I'd wait till my parents were asleep, until my brothers, like everybody was asleep, and I would have another brother, he's a couple years younger than me, and I would go into his room, steal his phone, go back to my room, text this guy all hours of the night, delete the messages, and then go and take the phone back. And I remember, like, my brother did not care for this guy at all, so he didn't have his number in his phone. So it wasn't like I just searched for his name in his phone. I had to go to school, and I was like, hey, sorry I didn't text you last night. I got grounded from my phone, but hey, I think I can probably just text you on my brother's phone. What's your number? And he was all cool about it. Oh yeah, here's my number, just text me after everybody, is asleep or whatever. So for one, there's another red flag, is he disrespects my parents and my family because he's okay with me being sneaky, plus I'm being sneaky. That's another red flag, okay? These were red flags placed right in front of me. But that wasn't enough to stop me. I was a teenage girl who learned through pain, and so I had, to learn the hard way in this situation. And so then I went to lunch with him. He said, let's go to his house. I thought it was a little weird, just because like we didn't know each other very well, and so I thought, well, what are we going to your house for? But he said he had to pick something up, so I didn't think anything of it. You know, we went to Tuttle. It was off-campus lunch, so it wasn't uncommon for students to go to their house during the lunch break. But then we get to his house. We get to his house, and he says that we should just go inside. That, you know, he has stuff to make for lunch there, and that let's just eat lunch here. Guys, that should have been the biggest red flag of all. I felt in my spirit and in my heart, this is not okay. Girls, you can say no. And guys, you can say no.
And with guys, because I'm a guy, I'll speak to guys. For us, you won't say no. If you are, I'll speak for myself, every time if I thought, okay, if I get in this situation, I'll say no. If we get to this point, you know, in the car, in the bedroom, I'll say no. And every single time, I didn't say no. So girls, you can say no. I'll say to the guys, you won't say no, even if you think you will. So don't get to that point to begin with. Listen to the red flags, like Dawn said. If you're having to be sneaky, red flag. If you're having to hide things from people who care about you and want what's best for you, red flag. If you're in places you are not supposed to be at times that you're not supposed to be there, red flag. And I can promise you, if I pulled every one of these adult leaders in here and asked them what was a big sin mistake they made in their life, every one of them, it probably had to do with something. They were being sneaky. They were someplace they shouldn't be when they were not supposed to be there. They were hiding details from those who love them, maybe their parents, their brothers or sisters, or their friends who care for them. Those are red flags. Those are red flags where you do not have to experience pain and heartache and things. And even you have, you know the red flags now. Don't let it happen again.
And for me, I felt like I couldn't say no, because if I said no, then, you know, he's not going to like me, he's not going to talk to me anymore, or whatever reason. And looking back on that was so silly of me, so dumb, because who cares? Who cares if he's not my husband? He's not the man I married. You know, the friends that I worried so much about on what they thought of me and what are they going to think if I do this, I don't talk to any of them today. Because I'll tell you this, when push came to shove, they weren't the ones that were by my side.
So this happens your senior year, and like you said in your video, you ran. You ran from your family, from your friends, from your town. You moved, you know, an hour and a half away where no one knew you. There was no accountability, you know. And you started living a lifestyle that definitely wasn't pleasing God. You started having relationships that definitely weren't God-pleasing. At what point did you realize, I'm definitely not following God anymore? When did that click in your head?
Honestly, it was years after I had stopped following God. And I think a lot of times that's what happens with us is you don't realize you're walking away from God until it's, you know, too late and you've already walked away from Him. So it wasn't until years later, you know, I had moved to a town that was about an hour away, hour and a half away, and I started going to parties then. Here's the thing is I would start going to parties, but I wouldn't drink, right? I would be the DD, or I would just say, you know, I don't drink. And it was easy at first. And you know me, I'm a I have good self-control, good willpower. I am stubborn as all get out. And I, even myself, got sucked into that lifestyle very quickly. And I guess looking back, like when that happened for me is it turned into, I would go to these parties, I wouldn't drink, and then I would have somebody come up to me and they'd say, here, taste this. I know you don't drink, but here, taste this. You know, you'll like this. Or the really big one is I remember being at a friend's house, and there was a group of us, and this guy said, hey, Dawn, here, you know, you want a beer? And I was about to say, I'm good. And then my best friend at the time was like, Dawn ain't gonna drink that. She doesn't drink. Almost in a way of like it was making fun of me. And I think it was like in that instant, it was like that feeling of insecurity and I want to be accepted by these people. So I immediately said, give me that, yeah, I will. And I think that was the moment that I really started drinking. That was like the first time. I remember there being a time where I was hanging out with these group of guys. Didn't know them very well, but I was hanging out with them, and it was me, one other girl, and then there was a group of them. And they said that they were going to stop by a gas station. They were going to get some beer, and they were going to go back roading. And I remember feeling in that moment, this is not okay. I should not be in this situation. And I feel looking back at it, that was God saying, hey, red flag, get out, like, find a way out. And so we stopped at the gas station. I go to the bathroom, and I called a good friend of mine, and I said, hey, I don't care what you have to do, but get me out of the situation. It doesn't feel right. So he did. He showed up. He made some excuse on why he had to take me home. And I left. And in that moment, I should have gone home, guys. I had a way out, and I should have gone home. But instead, I chose to ignore that out, and I went to a party that was happening down the street from my house. And that was the very first night that I got drunk. That was the very first night that I was introduced to what that feeling of what drinking could do, to me at the time. That group of kids that I was with, those group of friends that I was with in that truck, they all got pulled over and taken to jail that night for drinking and driving. And I look back in that moment, and I think like that could have been a very pivotal moment for me to completely turn my life around. But again, I chose to ignore another red flag that God was placing in front of me. And I think that during that time, after I really got sucked into that, there were a lot of mornings that I would wake up after partying the night before, and I just felt empty. I felt after. I had the time of my life the night before, but there was always something missing. And I called myself a Christian. I even attended church. I was even on the worship team at the church that I was attending. But a lot of you guys know in here that just because you attend church or just because you're involved at your church does not make you a Christian. Because outside of those walls, I was living a life that didn't honor God. I was going to parties. I was experimenting with certain drugs. I was giving pieces of myself away to guys that I can never get back. And I think it was then, after I had hit rock bottom, that I realized if I were to die tonight, I would not make it to heaven.
So through this story, it kind of has, I feel like, some progressions. You moving to Tuttle and changing yourself for the approval of others, and finding your confidence in what others think of you. And then you blaming God for a tragedy that happened your senior year and blaming yourself. And then totally turn your back on God and just living a lifestyle that didn't honor him at all. What would you say to someone, because I feel like probably most of us in here might feel like we're in one of those areas. You are struggling with changing yourself for your approval of others to approve of you and how you look, and you find your self-worth in what others think about you. Or maybe you are blaming God for something bad that happened in your life, or blaming yourself. Or maybe you are being tempted just to turn your back from God. What would you say to someone in any of those situations now?
It might be fun now. You might be loving life right now, going to parties, hanging out all hours of the night with that boy or that girl. It might be fun now. I had a blast. I'm not going to sit up here and lie to you guys and say my life sucked, I hated it. No, I was having the time of my life. But I always felt like there was something missing. I felt like there was a void in my life that I was trying to fill in all these other areas. But I can tell you from experience, the only person that can fill that is God. Okay, no one else can, no thing else can, only God can. So you might be having fun now, but I can tell you that the longer that you live your life away from God, from experience, the harder it is to come back to him. I felt dirty. I felt gross. I felt worthless. What would God want with me? I have screwed up way too many times. I remember asking him or wanting to ask him for forgiveness, and I didn't even know what to say. And guys, I still, to this day, there are still times, I'm human. I screw up. There are still times that I find myself, I don't even know what to say. And in those moments, I would just say, Jesus, Jesus. He knows your heart, guys. He knows what's going through your head. But the longer that you choose to live your life away from him, the harder it's going to be to leave those friends that you know you shouldn't be around, you shouldn't be hanging out with. The harder it's going to be to let go of that boy or that girl that you know deep down you shouldn't have anything to do with. But I can promise you that letting go, you guys are going to have such a peace. That's the word that keeps coming to my mind when I think, what is my life like now? You will have such a peace that surrounds you. Jesus is standing there with open arms saying, I've got you. Come home. You're going to be okay. You know, Riley and I, you know, the leaders in here, students in here, we're standing there, arms open wide, saying, come home. You're going to be okay.
You know, when we filmed this, back in March. This story, what happened your senior year, that was the biggest trial you've ever been through in your life. Little did you know you're about to top it in April. You know, losing your ability to walk completely. We were in the hospital for the whole month, away from our kids. How did going through this in God still being there and getting you through it, how did that help you get through your most recent trial with your OMAs and losing your ability to walk and in your faith?
Guys, that was the hardest thing that myself and us as a family, the hardest thing that we have ever gone through. It wasn't just my ability to walk, it was my ability to stand, my ability to sit on my own, my ability to do my own hair and makeup and to write, to drive. Everything was taken from me. I remember sitting in my hospital bed and I just screamed at God, why, how? How can he let this happen? Why is this happening to me? I was so angry with him, so mad. And I just want to tell you that just because you're a Christian doesn't mean you're never going to go through times where you doubt God, where you get mad at him. It's okay. I remember there being a morning, Easter morning actually. This girl walks in my room, and we were not close friends. I knew who she was, but we were not close. So I thought it was a little random that she walked in, and she said, Dawn, I was praying for you at home. I was praying for a healing in you, and I felt God just tell me, no, you need to stop right now, and you need to drive up to the hospital, and you need to pray this over her. So that's what I'm going to do, Dawn. Is that okay? And I remember, you're not going to say no to prayer. I want to be healed. Yes, I'll take all I can get. But she started speaking things over me. Guys, she started speaking thoughts over me, things that I was thinking in my head that I hadn't even voiced to my own husband. You know, she said things like, you are worthy of a miracle. I'd been questioning, who am I for God to heal me? I'm nobody. Like, why would he perform a miracle on me? I'm nobody. Okay? She started saying, Dawn, there's nothing more that you need to do. There's nothing you're doing wrong. You aren't praying wrong. You're not doing anything wrong. You just need to keep doing what you're doing. Keep leaning into me. Just that morning, I was praying to God, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing this wrong? Am I praying wrong? Things that only God would know, okay? Because I haven't voiced them to anybody else. So I knew in this moment, God was using this girl that I barely knew, and he was speaking through her in that moment. So she continues to pray over me, and then she goes, all right, now I need you to stand. And I looked at her like, girl, you are crazy. Have you seen me stand? I can't stand. I couldn't. I could not stand. I had to have 2 or 3 people help me stand at this point. And she said, I need you to stand. And I looked at Riley like, tell her I can't stand. And he looks at me and he says, Dawn, this is your Lazarus moment. Stand up. And that was the first time that I was able to stand for longer than just a couple seconds independently. And no, God didn't heal me in that moment. I wanted him to. I had hope that he was going to, but it didn't. But I remember him speaking to my heart and saying, Dawn, I'm not going to heal you today. I'm not healing you yet, but I'm going to. Do you trust me? It was the clearest that I've ever heard God's voice. And some of you in here need to quiet the distractions in your life so you can actually hear what God is trying to tell you and then actually listen to him.
I just want everyone to bow their heads and close their eyes for a moment. Just think about yourself. What is God speaking to you tonight? Do you struggle with your confidence in changing yourself to please others? And you need to shift your focus on pleasing God? Are there red flags in decisions you're making that are going to put you in a compromising position? Have you given up and walking away from God? Do you struggle with trusting anybody, let alone God? If you'd say yes to any of those things and you want prayer tonight, would you just stand up to your feet right where you're at? You know, a few weeks ago, Dawn was supposed to come up and do the welcome at the beginning of the service, and it was right before she couldn't do it. She started shaking real bad. If you know her condition from her OMOS she had, she goes, I can't do it. And she was convulsing. You know, just a few months ago, we had 5 of us, big, strong men, had to lift her wheelchair up here so she could wheel out here and talk at the senior banquet. And now she can stand. As you know, she might still be a little wobbly, I don't know. But students, God wants to minister to you if you're struggling with trusting. You can trust God. It might not be in your timing. If you're struggling with confidence, God has made you exactly how he wants to make you. And there's no amount of dressing differently or acting differently or talking differently that can make you loved anymore by your Creator. If you're standing up tonight, would you just come down front and begin to pray and begin to connect with God? Students, leaders, if you have a friend who responds, come pray for them. Students, connect with Jesus tonight, how he wants you to connect. Maybe you need to forgive yourself. Maybe you need forgiveness from someone else. Maybe you just need to accept that you can't go back and do something different. But tonight is the night that you can start something new. And it's not about changing what you've done, but it's about moving forward in what God has for you. Let's just spend some moments praying and worshiping and connecting with Jesus.